All right. All right. We are smack in the middle, actually, in the end of a certain discussion. And 50% of our class weren't here the previous class.
Monday I was here. This was the class before that I wasn't here.
Oh, good. You were okay. Monday you were here. Okay.
I was only 50% here. I was only 50%.
You only 50%. Anyway, I want to introduce the topic that we are discussing so that we're all into it. And I'm sure those who were here before won't mind. We are on page 193, and we are 8 lines from the top. The line begins with the word hatainuk. There are 2 lines hatainuk, beginning with hatainuk, and we are in the second one. Trying to make this introduction as brief as possible. There are 7 days in the week. The 7 days of the week correspond to the 7 midos. Chesed, Sunday is Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, and ends up in Shabbos, which is Malchus. The correspondence to the spheres is due to the fact that the creation of the world reflects the spheres, the midas of Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. There are explanations why the various things that were created on each one of these days. The first day, light, and then there was a splitting of the upper waters from the lower waters, and then the third day they were a double creation. How that corresponds specifically to that specific sphere, to that specific midah. Like light relates to chesed. The splitting up and limiting the lower worlds, the lower world from the higher world, that's the young gvura, and so forth. And all that ends up in Shabbos. And the Rebbe is asking, in line of explanation, of explaining the point that he wants to explain, is how is it that we have this cycle, and every week after Shabbos we begin counting the days again from 1. Sunday is the first day, the second day, and the third day. Since it's a continuum of time, so it should go continue on. After Shabbos is the 7th day, it should be 8, 9, and 10. How can we count 1 to 3 all the time if we recycle it? And the Rebbe explains the principle that even though the creation itself represents the midos, the attributes, but the real force behind revealing of these attributes is a much higher force. And this is called oineg. Loosely translated, the word oineg is delight, or in our language we translate it as pleasure. except this refers to a different type of pleasure than what we usually refer to as pleasure, something that's pleasing, an activity that's pleasing to us. This is a pleasure of the soul. This is a pleasure that is an entity unto itself. It's not that because of some experience I have pleasure. Like I ate a nice piece of cake, so I had pleasure. This is oineg, this is the primary expression of life. Primary expression of the soul is in that oineg. The very fact that the human being wants to live, this wanting to live is a positive desire. It is not merely that, like you say, he doesn't want to die because he doesn't know it's a mistake. He doesn't know what's going to happen. He doesn't want to have the pain of dying. There's a positive force, positive cognizance of the significance of the experience of life. What's in life? We understand the negative. He doesn't want to have the pain and the suffering. That we understand. But what's the positive opinion? What happens if all of a sudden he disappears? What happened? And there is a a primary force in the human soul that wants to live. What is in this life? This is the connection that the soul has with the infinite truth, and this is its delight in having that connection. And this connection, this sense of its experience of the infinite truth, and this is expressed in the form of delight, of oineg. And this oineg is the force behind all the activity and all the revelation that comes from the nefesh. Like we said, for instance, we said that Avraham Avinu, his midah was midas hachesed. He put his life, all his activities, his avodas Hashem, his service of God was an expression of chesed, of kindness, of goodness. But this was not merely the experience of goodness that he appreciated, because as we said, that goodness and kindness applies only when there is someone who is in need of that goodness. But there is no one there. There is no one who is in need, who needs his services. Then there is no reason why he should have that urge to do goodness and kindness. There's nobody in need. It's the need that elicits that sense of, I want to do a favor to someone. But if someone is not, if no one is in need of your favor, then there should not be that desire, I want to do a favor to someone. And yet by Avraham we find that when Avraham, as the Torah relates, that he was sitting outside of his tent waiting for wayfarers, and Hashem made it that there should be no wayfarers because Avraham was just after the Milah. Hashem wanted to spare him the effort. Avraham was suffering from this. Why? There's nothing elicits that chesed. And the answer to that is that behind the chesed there is the oinig, that he has a desire, an oinig, he appreciates bestowing, appreciates revealing an expression. By Avram, this expression came in the form of chesed, but the initial force behind it is this oinek, that the nefesh wants to give, wants to reveal itself. That's the oinek. And therefore, the Rebbe explains, since that the primary force behind all revelation is in the oinek, therefore, when the revelation comes to its fullest expression, the greater revelation, the more experience of oinek there is. Like we said, that when one understands things, when he recognizes things intellectually, there's a certain level of delight. But then when that comes into a feeling of the heart, there's a greater feeling of delight. When that comes into action, that is the greatest. Then he feels fully accomplished. Which means that the oineg comes, this initial force that brings everything out, comes to its greatest expression, the greatest force at the point of the greatest revelation, on the lowest level. Now it's that which comes through various rungs until it comes to action. And this is the cycle. That when this oina comes to its full revelation at the point of action, it's just called malchus, this is where the oina is in its fullest. And thus this constitutes the cycle of the week, and this is what we're going to see inside here now. V'zeh inyan hatainuk. Okay, we have the place. V'zeh inyan hatainuk sheb'Shabbos. This is the principle that we say Shabbos, there is a special revelation of tainuk, of this delight of the nefesh, the initial force behind all activity. Ukveishe kosov, as the Pasuk says, V'koroso la Shabbos oineg. Shabbos, this is a Pasuk, the Rosa la Shabbos saying, this is the mitzvah of Shabbos, the requirement of Shabbos is not only in the abstention of work and keeping it holy and so forth, the reason for the abstention of work in Shabbos. And the reason for keeping it holy is because Shabbos is the revelation of a higher quality than activity. This is the source of all activity. This is the oinek. Because Shabbos has to be called a day of oinek, because that reverts back to the initial source of it all. Os tisanag al Hashem. Al-Havaya, that's what the Pasuk says, Os tisanag al-Havaya, that v'korosol Shabbos oineg, that if you declare Shabbos as a day of oineg, Os tisanag al-Havaya, then you will have oineg, you will have delight in the godly presence. This is all a Pasuk in the Tanakh. This is in contrast, Shabbos and Yom Tov. Yom Tov is called days of joy, Simcha. Shabbos is not a day of joy, necessarily. Shabbos is a day of oineg. They are very different things. Shezehu bechinas hatainug. This oineg of Shabbos, that is the tainug shemeir b'sfiras hamalchus, that ultimately comes to full expression in Sfiras HaMalchus, in the Sphira of Malchus. Briefly, what is the Sphira of Malchus? Malchus means kingship, rulership. In terms of Kochas HaNefesh, in human terms, by an individual, Malchus is machshava dibur ma'aseh, thought, speech, and deed. In other words, the actual expression of the nefesh. The intellectual experience, the emotional experience, this is all internal to the person. When it comes to thought, speech, and deed, this is where that comes out externally, particularly, mostly in action. This is completely external, because all action entails dealing with something completely outside of himself. Even speech, one does not speak to himself, he speaks when there's someone else to listen to. Even thought is in a certain sense in relating to the outside, because the principle of thought is to think of one's intellectual concept in realization, how that would be understood from an outside perspective. This is called Malchus. The reason this is called Malchus means, as I said, kingship. Just as in the case of a king, in contrast to a minister or a secretary. A secretary, in olden days was called a minister. He's an expert in one of the fields, in some fields of government. But everything that he says, everything that he presents as a right and advice, as this is supposed to be done, he presents it all on the basis of some reason. He argues his point and he says that under these circumstances, this is the best thing for us to do. So essentially, what he presents is the intellectual perspective of the idea, because he has no authority to make things happen. He can only present the reason, the arguments for one choice or another. Who has the authority to make things happen? The Melech, the king himself. He's the one who makes the decision. And when he makes a decision and he orders certain things to happen a certain way, that order does not require, when the Megamalo and the king gives out an order, there is no requirement that this order should come along with supportive evidence, supportive reasoning. It's an order from the king, and that has to be obeyed because it came from the king. This, as I said again, in simple human terms, this is what occurs in human experience. This is called kibbutz golius. You know what kibbutz golius is? Huh?
I'm going to find out right now.
Ingathering of the exile. Mike, you're welcome. You can join. I just want to pursue this. So, in human terms, it means like this. When a person goes through all kinds of intellectual realizations, and then it goes into the emotion that he feels like he has a sense of of mercy, as a sense of kindness, or whatever it is. It could be chesed or gvura. Throughout that process, he has a sense of the background, of what is the reason why he wants to do it. When it comes to the action itself, the action is the so to speak, the simple result of the entire process. That as a result of this entire intellectual and emotional process, you have to do such and such. And this deed itself, it's a bare deed. It doesn't even carry in itself any kind of emotional and intellectual quality. Just a simple example. You want to give charity. You want to help a poor person. So you take out $1 and give him. Now, the transfer of $1 from one hand to another does not in itself constitute kindness. It could be you paying him for work that he did for you. That action itself is a simple action. That could mean all kinds of different things. In order for the action to take place, the entire process, internal process, intellectual and emotional process, has to go through it. And then he has to decide on the basis of this intellectual and emotional realization, what is the means, this when it comes to thought, speech, and deed, what is the means that this can fully be expressed? But then it comes to expressing it, then it's a simple action. It's no longer chesed or gvura, it's an action. Do this. And this deed in itself, on the one hand, this deed is devoid of all the richness of his intellectual realization or emotionalization. On the other hand, this deed more fully represents the oinek, the desire of the nefesh to express itself and to do things. This is why in the Malchus, this is the level, this is the point, where is the greatest sense of revelation, of hamshocha, from revelation from the nefesh. And because of that, there is the greatest delight in this. No matter how much delight, how much personal experience and feel of, like we discussed the other day, Monday, the feel of the fact that I'm alive and I'm experiencing things. Indeed, this comes to the greatest level of expression, even though emotionally and intellectually it is devoid of that. It's only in the background. It's not expressing necessarily the intellectual. There isn't that excitement. He's just doing the deed. But the full sense of the nefesh, full sense of the life force of the nefesh, comes to expression in this deed, in the action. And this is what he says at Shabbos. This is the end of the creation. And this is where there is the greatest sense of revelation. This is why Shabbos is the oimek. This is what happened on Shabbos. The Torah says Shabbos, there was no creation, and everything was created during the 6 days. Shabbos was another thing. What was Shabbos? Vaychulo hashamayim. Vaychulo means they were completed. The sense of completion, and this was complete. This is where you realize the full effect of the entire process. And this is where the oinek, the delight of the soul, comes to full expression. This is why Shabbos is oinek. Okay, let's continue right there. V'zehu gamkin ho'aliyah sheb'Shabbos. This too explains what is spoken of by regarding to Shabbos, the aliyos of Shabbos. Aliyos means rising higher. The rise that takes place on Shabbos. This rise just as in the case of a human experience, when the person has a certain aim, a certain plan, a certain idea that he wants to express. And as we said, this is rooted and it comes from his oineg nefesh, from the life force of the nefesh itself. So throughout the process, as he is actively pursuing that purpose, he has a certain force behind it that invigorates his activity. But then when it comes to a full accomplishment of that activity, he's no longer active. But then he realizes that his initial intent has been fully accomplished. And now there is, so to speak, the complete closure of the cycle. He goes back to the initial plan, initial thought, and says, it's all here. That means that at this point, during the entire process, he was involved in pursuing certain activities. Some of them may have been trivial even. Involved on trivial is an important point is that he was not involved directly in the sense of the purpose of what he's trying to do. After the completion, then he goes back to the top. He says, this is what was accomplished. This is what I see in front of me. This is the aliyah. This is when it rises. The entire person rises back to his oinek, to his initial source of the entire process. This is called Aliyah Shabbos. Shabbos also is called Aliyah, which means that the world, everything in the entire creation, arises, is elevated to its source, to the initial force, the initial reason for the creation, because that's when it reached its full potential. This is not by Chula, because it reached it from completion, and that's when Aliyah Shel Shabbos. Lihiyois, being that Shozuhi Soiv HaHashpoah Shebemalchus, being that Shabbos, this represents the Soiv HaHashpoah, the end of revelation of Malchus. Hine besoifo. So then, at the end, hu bederech oir choizer. At the end, there is the principle what's called oir choizer. Oir choizer means a reverberating light, which I'll explain in a minute. Shechoizer lekadmusoi, that it returns back to its beginning. The concept of Oir Choizer is a very broad and involved concept. But in simple terms, the simple illustration of Oir Choizer means reverberation, that something comes back and hits back to its source. Just as when you hit a ball, you throw a ball against a wall. So your force, the force of your hand, has now thrown this ball, and the ball is carried in one direction. As the ball is flying, you cannot tell from its flight essentially where it's coming from and where it's going. It's just in the middle of flight. When it finally hits the wall and it reverberates, where does it go back? It goes back to where in the direction where it's coming from. Why does it go back to the direction of where it's coming from? Why does it altogether reverberate? Why does it go back? There's a certain force that carries this ball. And this force is gradually expressing itself as it flies. When it comes to the wall and the wall stops it, what happens at this point, that the entire force that is still there in carrying the ball is now condensed because it cannot fly any further. So it's now condensed completely in this one, in one moment, brought together. Not gradually expressing, but condensed, brought together in one moment, because the wall stops the ball flying. And this force is now, the entire force that's still remaining in this ball is now throwing it back. Because the ball does not cancel out the force. It just stops the flight. It doesn't cancel it out. So it now condenses, brings all of it together. So in this moment, there is much more force expressed than throughout the flight. Throughout the flight, there's a certain force that's expressed, but it's all very limited to what is being used up, so to speak, during this flight. But when it comes to hitting the wall, this the cumulative force that's still there in there comes together, and it throws it back. This is called oil choizer. The same is true. This is a physical illustration of a profound spiritual phenomenon, what we spoke about before. That there is a spirit that initiates a person's action. And throughout the process that he is acting, it's all initiated by this force. But only a certain amount is being expressed during the process. What is necessary to carry it from one stage to the other. We have, in our days, we have a very good illustration of that. That's the assembly line. In the assembly line, they put certain parts along the assembly line. Are you familiar with the assembly line? No. The assembly line, this is, when you build a car these days, you don't build a car in one place. A car consists of many parts. And they figured out, this is years ago, that it would be much more efficient. You know what efficient means? Much more quick, much more and better if they have a station in one place where they do just one thing. This place they put on the wheels. This place they put on the axle. This place they put the windows, put the doors. So they have, along the assembly line, they have all the parts necessary to build a car, to build 10 cars. And as the assembly, as it moves to the station, this station does this thing, this station does this thing, this. Then, at the end, they put the paint. And it goes through a painting process. It seems like the car was born over here at the end, but that's not where it was born. It was born throughout the entire process of the assembly line. But the concept, the original plan that started the assembly line was this fully produced car that comes out at the end. This is where you see the full effect of the original plan. the full power of the original pen, if you see at the end of the assembly line.
Is that what you mean, or a chayzer, that it reflects back?
It reflects back,
to the
right.
original idea?
That's right. Right. It reflects back the original idea, and in their assembly line, one doesn't know of the other. They don't care. They put some ideas. I don't care what happens afterwards. But in human terms, this has a very profound effect, because what happens at the end, it actually evokes the sense of purpose that was there in the beginning. During the process, you kind of lose it. You're involved in accomplishing the little pieces, the little steps that you need to accomplish. But at the end, it evokes, it goes back to the original sense and purpose of why you're getting involved in this in the first place. And therefore it reflects the full power, the full force that initiated the entire process. This is called Oir Chayzer. That's why Oir Chayzer is extremely powerful, because it reflects the initial force that started the entire process. Going back where? Going back to the soul, going back to the oinig, to the delight of the soul, which is even prior to the intellect. The intellect is already part of the process. This is what he says here. Where it reverts back to its kadmusay. Kadmusay means, normally we say kadmusay means the beginning, but actually it's before the beginning. It's that which preceded the beginning. The beginning in a process, the beginning of any process is the intellectual identification of what I want to do. But that also has an initiator. Why do I want to do anything? That's before it's defined. Before the intellect defined what I need to do. The force of life that I need to do, that I want to do, this oineg, this precedes the beginning of any process. And at the end, this is choizer lekad musoy. It goes back to before the beginning, to the initial force, the initial oineg of what it means to accomplish this, to do this. Okay, and this is what the Rebbe explains here in very short terms. Nimtza, thus it comes out, Sheb Shabbos, that on Shabbos, Hu Aliyah, this is the moment where it rises back up, the Madrega Shalamayla Mehazman, to the Madrega, to the level which is before time. Time is the process, a process, starting with the intellect, everything has a certain moment of time, duration of time. Even the initial concept, like you say, Chokhmah. Chokhmah is called an initial concept of a spark of realization. But a spark also takes time. It's also a presence. It's a moment, but it's a moment of time. And from this spark is then afterwards drawn out and developed the entire concept, which eventually goes into the emotion and into the action. But this we say is l'maylo mehazman, which means this is the source of that spark, which is totally not measured, not in terms of time. It's in time. Anything that's in time means that it comes and goes. It came into being. That's what time. Time means it came into being. That which is l'maylo mehazman means that it is there all the time. It didn't come into being. It's the constant truth, the constant presence of the nefesh, of the soul, which is above time. In Shabbos it goes back to the Madrege Lekat Musoy Shalamayla Me'asma, before the initiation, the initial time. V'chein ha'hamshocho hi milmayla mehazman. And thus too, since Shabbos reverts back to that Madrege which is above time, therefore the hamshocha, the revelation that comes from above on Shabbos, is also from the place that's l'mayla mehazman. Again, this is I'll speak of it in our moshel, in illustration of a human experience, that the completion of the work, there's an interesting Shabbos, there are 39 malachas that are forbidden on Shabbos. 39 malachas. Arboim choserachas. These malachas, as we know, are not just exhaustive work, things that get you tired. That's not the principle of Shabbos. Shabbos is malachas that accomplish something, that change a certain situation from one to another. That's the malacha of Shabbos. There's one malacha that's called maki bepatish. What is maki bepatish? The word maki bepatish means it hits. I hit with a hammer. Hit with a hammer. What does that mean, maki bepatish? So this is a reference to if a worker who is making a keli, one is fashioning some kind of a vessel. In olden days, everything was done by hand. He was fashioning a plate, a pot, whatever it is, and the whole time he makes sure that it's straight here, it's straight there. He heats it up and fashions it in a certain form. At the last moment, when it's all complete, he gives it a smile and says, "Okay, it's done." This is called maki bepatish. How this?
Not change anything?
Not changing up, maki bepatish, right? This is the declaration of completion, and it's a malacha. How this malacha translates in malachas of Shabbos, that's a separate thing that we can another time. You learn Hilchos Shabbos, you'll know. I'm just saying this is called a malacha, maki bepatish. What is this malacha maki bepatish? The completion, the declaration that I have completed it, is a malacha. It's ready to go. This is the point of what I said before. This is the oir choizer, that I've completed it. Now I see the whole thing. And then there is also the hamshocha that along with this oir choizer that it reverts back and say, "Oh, I've completed my plan." In completing the plan, there is the delight in seeing my initial plan completed. So it goes back and forth. That this, so to speak, elicits, it arouses the sense of purpose, and that sense of purpose, which is a very powerful force, that I have to do something. I have a force. I have a life that needs to accomplish something. This initial force is now reverberating in this, and then he looks at this finished product and says, this is reality. This is the real thing. Who declares it as the real thing? This is the oinek, the initial force behind that initiated the entire process. This is why Shabbos, because Shabbos is the day of completion, So that goes back and elicits back from the very source of all existence to prior to existence. Why did existence come into being in the first place? That's what it is. And then that madrege, that which is higher than existence, reveals itself in Zim and Shabbos. This is why Shabbos is a holy day. Because Shabbos is, even though it's one of the days of the week, but really it represents a period that is above days of the week. That's why we don't know how to do any malacha. Because it's not really part of a worldly presence. It represents something higher than world.
How is for men for it's not a completion of everything.
Sorry?
It's not a completion of a human being. It's not when someone gets into Shabbos, it's completed.
I mean, how do we experience the Oineg of Shabbos? For us to experience the Oineg of Shabbos, we have to understand how we relate to Shabbos. The halacha, the Gemara says that on Shabbos, as a person enters into Shabbos, one of the requirements of his preparation for Shabbos is to view himself, to regard all of his responsibilities as having been fully accomplished. You enter into Shabbos in the way that Shabbos is designed to be entered. Then you can experience the Shabbos. Clearly, more sensitive people, a tzaddik or somebody of a higher sensitivity, spiritual sensitivity, by him Shabbos is a different experience. But even by us, even by the simplest, the whole idea, the whole inyan, the Gemara says, the Gemara tells a story that a certain king came to visit a Yid and he gave him from food of Shabbos. He says, "Oh, that's great." And on Sunday he calls him and says, "Make something like this for me." He says, "No. There's an ingredient called Shabbos. That only exists on Shabbos." Okay. You know cholent, what cholent is? I don't think you'll eat cholent on Sunday. But Shabbos, he wouldn't forgo open to cholent. He said, I cannot eat cholent on Shabbos. Right? That's a different thing. So, hopefully everyone feels the Shabbos to some degree. Clearly, there are madrigas in this. But one thing that is a requirement that Shabbos one has to clear his mind and know that there is nothing worldly can possibly bother him on Shabbos. It can be considered Shabbos. Okay, so that's what it says. V'chein ha'hamshoch hi milmayla me'azman. The hamshoch, that which is drawn back, that which is revealed in the world from above, is from a level, from madrege that is above zman, above time, meaning above existence. The initial force of the V'yachar haShabbos maschil hazman. Then after Shabbos, again begins the zman, the period, that level of existence which is called zman, time, which means that at this point everything is in zman, means everything has a finite, a limited, and definitive presence. There is the the initial spark, there is the development of the idea, everything in its proper place, in its proper time, like an assembly line, essentially, until the week is completed again. Lochein, and for this reason, moinin, rishein, sheni, ushlisi. This is why we count again. We start counting again, first, second, and third. The weeks of the days of the week, that's what you ask them. How can you count first, second, and third? This is already day number 1 million. Because it came to completion. And now it rose up to a level which is above time. So time starts all over again. When time starts over again, so you start counting again from the first day. Shabbos, the world rises to a level which is above time. And then Sunday begins the cycle of time again. Vazehu. And therefore this explains what we mentioned before. Shehein Shiva Simei HaHekef. That these 7 days, this is called Shiva Simei HaHekef, the 7 days of the cycle. The 7 days of the week are called Shiva Simei HaHekef, 7 days that complete the cycle. Mipnei shehamshocha mehamidos, because that this hamshocha comes from midos, which is, like I said, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, the 6 midos and the 7, choizer cholila, it returns back cholila in a cycle, starts all over again. Why does it start all over again? Again, because we mentioned, because because in the meantime the world rose to a place higher than time. V'gam, and also mipnei sheb'Shabbos ho'aliyah, because on Shabbos the rising, v'ha'hamshocha, and the revelation, hi milmaylo mehazman, is from a level that is above time. From a level that's above time. Okay. Just want to interject in this cycle before we conclude. Hashem created the world in this cyclical fashion, form. This we see in days of the week, and that the Torah relates to seven days of creation. And then there is also the lunar month, which is a month, and the moon starts all over again, which also denotes a beginning and an end of time, and then starting all over again. Then there is a solar year, which is the cycle of the sun, and essentially the seasonal differences, changes, which also is in a cycle and reverts back. Then there are broader cycles. There is a cycle of 19 years with the sun and the moon days completely coincide, and there's a cycle of 28 years. There's a cycle of 7 years, all kinds of different cycles, but everything is in the form of cycle. The idea of this cycle, as we learned over here, is that at the end of the cycle, everything starts from a fresh start. It's a rejuvenation. We can readily see this in the world, in the fact that there's the 4 seasons, and there is a rejuvenation every time. After the winter, there's a spring. It's a rejuvenation of the world. It starts all over again, and then it goes back. It goes back to the end of that cycle and starts all over again. And the significance of this, in this rejuvenation, is, as we said here, that every time it rejuvenates, it starts and it gets its vigor and its invigoration, its inspiration from the very source of the inspiration. What I mean to say is the following. There's a certain inertia, a certain continuum of action. When a person can get into a certain, can't think of the proper word, mode of activity, and one pushes the other, and pushes the other, and pushes the other. Besides the fact that it eventually exhausts itself and it loses vigor, it also loses purpose. Like when a person is in a certain activity, regardless of what it is, if one is a lawyer and he repeats his activity constantly, he's doing the same thing. After a while, he feels he doesn't see what I'm doing. I'm just doing I'm doing it by rote. I'm an expert on doing this. I don't see my intellect, or my emotion, or my soul being involved in this, because I'm not creative. I'm just following through on the same activity. Therefore, there is a loss of vigor, loss of life. This cyclical form, this is what brings it back to an end, and then starts all over again. This is true in the entire creation, in everything that Hashem created. And even on the most minute level of a day is a 24-hour period. But in the 24-hour period, there is a day and a night, where the day ends, and then comes night, and then after night starts all over and the day. And when one starts the day again, he starts from scratch. He starts a new day. He doesn't repeat the day before, because he starts from night. So he has to again reinvigorate himself and start all over again. What is it? What is the significance of day to me? Why am I getting up? Why am I getting into this activity? He has to be refreshed. In addition to keeping our activities refreshed all the time because of this cycle, there is another all-important factor in this benefit, and that is that every time that it gets reinvigorated and restarted, it gets restarted with a different depth, because we don't repeat what it did yesterday. So every time we start again, there is a deeper sense of what we are doing, of what life is about. We may not realize it, but in fact, it's a deeper sense. And this is how a person grows, in fact, into maturity and into productivity and revealing all of his potential and all of his human qualities. So that, in fact, like we always say, we're in the middle of the day, I know what I'm doing, and this is what I'm supposed to do. I already made a decision before. I'm supposed to do this and that. I have to daven and learn, whatever it is. But then, there is a time when I have to go to sleep. Sleep means that I'm no longer in a state of activity. I've completed this day's activity. And everything has to go back to its initial state, to its source. Going back into myself, into the soul. Then when I wake up in the morning, I have to have a fresh look at life, fresh look at the day, fresh look at what is this all about. And with this, I have to get up and start my day. This fresh look, besides the fact that it reinvigorates and gives and refreshes, so to speak, the vigor and the inspiration for activity, actually it should serve, and if it's done properly, to bring a deeper sense of what it is that we're doing. So that one day is not like the previous day. Because it comes from the source, from a state of inactivity. If I'm in a state of activity, so one step pushes the other. Like if a person is running, he can't even stop himself. But I'm not in a state of activity. Why do I start it? I started from a state of inactivity, which means higher than activity. And I say, okay, there's something that initiates it. It's the oineg hanefesh. It's the oineg hanefesh that initiates it. And that brings a new life into this whole into a person's life, into a person's day. Okay, so let's finish the line here, the complete line. Therefore, according to this explanation that we now said, that Shabbos, there's 6 days, and then there is Shabbos, and Shabbos is the day when everything rises back to Kademusoi, to that which precedes it, to the beginning of time, or beginning for time. In other words, before time, what initiated time. Therefore it comes out that Gam Halamailo Mehazman, that even that which is above time, Hainu Madrege Soivav Kol Almin, which is the Madrege what's known as Soivav Kol Almin. Soivav Kol Almin means that which the godly light, the godly presence that is above world, that surrounds the world. Nichlal Gam Ken B'mei HaHekef. Even that is also included in this cycle. This is part of the cycle. Yemei HaHekef, these days of the cycle. Shabbos, we said, is also part. The cycle is 7 days. Shabbos is part of the cycle. So even though Shabbos is above time, but there is a madrege that's above time that also can relate to time, and that is the Shabbos. Okay, and the point of this, the whole place, this whole chapter here, and the conclusion, is to explain the significance. We'll say Shmoina, the 8th day, because that's the Maimar Hibayim Hashmini, the 8th day. The 8th day is higher than the Mei HaHekef. So the Rebbe explained what is the Mei HaHekef, what is a cycle. A cycle is not that's just the 6th day. The 7th day is also part of the cycle, because the 7th day is that which completes the 6th. It's part of the cycle.
I have a question.
Sure.
We said before the Keser, it's the Matza, it's the intermediate between Orem Sof and the Matzil and Netzar, right? So it means it's Malch after the time is bringing it down. It's from Orem Sof to the Matzil. But you say after the Shabbos, after the new day, you should grow. It should be new death. But in spiritual, it's totally opposite. Through the Talmud is going down. From Atzilus to Malchus to
Right. Right. So it goes down, and it inspires, so to speak, the entire process of Atzilus, the creation of Atzilus, of the of this cycle until it comes to Malchus, and Malchus reconnects back to the Kesser.
What about Bria?
Bria is the result of Malchus. Bria is what we call in human terms, it's called machshava dibur u'maisa. This is an external thing, not like that which takes place internally, the intellect and the emotion.
But what, okay, so not Bria, between Oren Sov and Atzilus. You said that because of Tainuk, it's become from Oren Sov Atzilus. It's down.
Right. So the Tainuk brings it down until the Tainuk, what is a Tainuk? Tainuk has, there's a Tainuk in revealing, and when this revelation comes to full force, full expression, which is in Malchus, this is when the Tainuk is fully accomplished. This is when it goes back to the Tainuk, and Tainuk becomes revealed fully in Malchus. During the process, the Tainuk is only initiating it, giving it force, but it's not fully revealed. In Malchus, it gets fully revealed.
But the Tainuk of the Atzilus is kind of, no, the Tainuk of Oren Sov, it's Malchus.
In Malchus, the Tainuk is fully revealed. Because the Tainuk is the initiator for all revelation, and in Malchus is the fullest scope of the revelation, fullest force of that revelation. Therefore, the Tainuk is most fully revealed in Malchus. And that's when it completes the cycle and starts all over again.
From the Bria, Malchus of the Atzilus is the Tainuk.
That's right. Right. Malchus, the Atzilus, becomes the Kesser for the Bria. That's a different cycle. Okay. Nice having you all. This is it for today.